Hello, and welcome to a mindful moment. I hope everyone's doing well. Melissa, how are you?
That is a very loaded question right now, I think. I'm actually, on a personal level, I'm very good, but on a world view level right now, I don't think I'm doing so good. I think I'm a little anxious. I'm a little nervous about what's going to be happening.
Well, you are not alone because with the election in the United States, less than 2 weeks away, anxiety is running high everywhere. It's going up the closer we get, the higher the anxiety is getting. So I think it's a really pertinent topic to talk about today because
Yeah.
most people are on edge. I'm feeling it, and you just said you're feeling it. It's not helping that the fear mongering is so intense. I cannot even turn on the TV like to regular TV now. It's off because I can't.
Yeah.
I
I
get,
don't watch any news, but still, I mean, I still know what's going on,
yeah.
you know?
Oh, I open up the newspaper online. It's like, ah. So anyway, I thought maybe that, mindfulness can help us with this. But I'm going to be honest, when your anxiety level gets too high, it's not like you can just sit down and quietly meditate. So what kind of wanted to talk today about just some strategies for navigating it or to kind of maybe reduce the stress level or bring the anxiety down a little bit, because this is really like mindfulness is a perfect tool for this, but it's intense. It's just getting to where like I'm being very careful what I say, when I'm out in public. I'm uh, constantly worried that I've, somehow offended someone or triggered someone just in a casual
Yeah.
conversation. I was on a call with somebody yesterday that it was a first time meeting. And as the conversation just sort of meandered, I'm like, be careful not to say anything about this. Be careful not to say anything about that. And
Yeah.
I don't usually have to monitor myself so carefully. It's exhausting.
It is exhausting. It's completely exhausting. And I have to remind my daughter who's in college, like there's some things we don't have to share. And right now it's such a tense time that maybe this is not something you need to share, how you believe or how you're going to vote or,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I will say elections in general, anxiety always mounts because they generate so much uncertainty, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's been true historically, and probably, I'm assuming, in other parts of the world too, not just here. But of course, because of our last 10, 12 years here, every year it seems to escalate, which we didn't really have that so much before that I can recall. But and then the problem, of course, with uncertainty is that it generates the what if scenarios.
Yeah.
All I'm hearing everywhere. What if Trump wins? What if Harris wins? What if there's violence? Well, what if it's the end of democracy? It's like, what if, what if, what if? And it's all so drastic, end of time stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, that's overwhelming.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, not to toot my own horn or yours, but we are very good with mindfulness. I really do feel like my life is better with mindfulness. I have a really good grasp on it. And if I'm to this point right now, to
Yeah.
where I'm getting a little obsessive about it mentally, where I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? What's going to
Yeah.
happen? What is the layperson feeling right now that doesn't know these tools and that doesn't have these, things? And for me, it's like, I know I have slipped into that anxiety driven mind when I can't stop thinking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, it's all pervasive. My mailbox is full every day,
Oh,
all
so
the political
obnoxious.
ads, and even, flat pictures. You can tell they're angry. Everybody's angry. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm just taking everything out and throwing it in the trash. I'm not reading
Yeah,
it.
I do
So
too.
for all the politicians out there, you might be wasting your money because I'm not
You
even
are
looking at it.
wasting your money. Nobody looks at that stuff. They all throw it away. And you are killing trees.
Um, and then, of course, like I said, if I turn on the TV, satellite, what comes up is, all the different apps you have or whatever. But if it's defaulted like to YouTube, the TV, YouTube,
Mhm.
then right off the bat, somebody's talking about it's always politics. So anyway, I have to be really quick with the remote. Like, no, 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 I don't want to hear this right now. But um, the main, I think the main thing to recognize with mindfulness is that it can ground you in the present, right? So when your mind starts that, what's going to happen? What if this? What if that? Um, just, well, first of all, if you're mindful, you're aware that that's where your mind is going. So, like what you just described, Melissa, is from practicing mindfulness. You know exactly when you're getting into anxiety. But mindfulness techniques will then bring you back to the present. So instead of worrying about the future, or the other thing people are doing is completely rehashing the past. It's going to be another January
I
6th.
know.
It's going to be another January. It's like,
So over it.
like, just stop the madness.
Like
What?
October is my favorite month, except when it's every 4 years. Then I can't stand October.
Yeah, it's just so much fear and anxiety. And of course, emotions are contagious. So, not everyone works in the public, but, we're out with people in the public, and we're working with people with high stress jobs. And I'm already, it's like, I get home and I'm like, I got to release all this tension. And it's not, I'm feeling it even this week. I haven't even honestly had time to have a full thought, is what I feel like so far this week. My
Oh,
email is blowing up, my text messages are blowing up, and it's not directly related, to the election. It's clearly everyone's anxiety has increased. So everything
mhm.
feels frantic or urgent because it's too much anxiety coming from too many different directions.
We talk about staying in the present moment a lot with mindfulness,
Mhm.
and that is wonderful. Yes, staying in the present moment. But there is a reality part of all of this that I think some people would say, I still need to be prepared if something happens. And, it's great to say, oh, let's just stay in the moment. But then is there any naivete to that, to where we're not being prepared for what could happen in reality?
I don't know, though, that you can prepare for something if you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I am always prepared for an emergency or a disaster. Like in that
Mhm.
way, if there were riots, I have water and food. So, I mean, there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with being prepared for that. I think it depends a lot on where you live.
Yeah.
There are certain places that there won't be any difference. It'll just be, you'll see it on TV and it'll cause anxiety if something happens. But I think in general, and this is really the heart of the problem, which is also related to uncertainty, is we forget to separate what's under our control versus what's out of our control, right? So we want to control the stuff we can't control anything about what's going to happen if anything happens. But yeah, sure, if you live in an area that's like a hotbed of, political angst and rivalry, and if there was violence before, I guess you could use that information for that, to say, well, I want to be prepared this time, that I don't have to go out of the house for a few days, whatever that would be. But I just think in general, the only thing we can control is our own response to what happens, our own, staying regulated instead of losing kind of control and becoming impulsive. A lot of the violence that happened in the past really had to do with people reacting. They weren't thinking necessarily. I mean, according to what they said later, they were reacting. And so it's like, let's get present, do the simple things that help us stay present, be mindful about where our attention is going. It's really easy. I mean, it's not that I haven't done this at all over the past few weeks. It's easy to say, turn on a TV or look at your phone, and you see, some rhetoric from one side or the other, and you start reading and you get sucked into it, right?
Yeah.
Excessive media consumption is going to cause anxiety. It's going to fuel your anxiety. So you can control that. That's one of the
Yeah.
things we can control. We can't control what people are going to do between November 5th and January 6th. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think it's better to kind of, again, focus on what we can control, pay attention to how much media we're absorbing. I think people need to be informed. I don't mean that we should ignore everything, but if you need to do, like a scheduled check-in. Okay,
Mhm.
I haven't checked to see what's happening today or this week or whatever your choice is, and you select a source and you just check in, and you don't start doom scrolling, and you don't get sucked into the rabbit hole. And also, I think it's really important to balance, if you're going to check the quote bad news, then include something also that's uplifting or neutral content, so that
Yeah.
it's not just that all you're seeing is terrible news or scary news.
But the whole way that politics work, it's all psychological.
Yes.
And the fact that, gosh, we have been through such junk in the past 5 years, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
our psychological safety level is so low. I really feel like it's so low.
I agree.
And That's why nobody can talk about what they think. Nobody can, because we just don't feel psychologically safe. Maybe not physically safe, but psychologically.
Yeah.
And politics preys on that. I mean, that's the whole point of it. It's like we just drive fear
Yeah.
so that you feel like you have to make this decision in order for your safety. And that may not really be reality.
Right.
It could just be what they're driving into your brain because that's what works psychologically.
Yeah, absolutely. Our brains are wired to look for it. And
Mhm.
and that's really what I mean about it's true fear mongering now. It's just this constant daily attack about if you don't do this, it's the end of
Yeah.
everything. And so I think it's so important that we are aware of our emotional triggers.
Mhm.
As you know, we're even talking to leaders now about, use some discretion over the next few weeks about performance evaluations or,
Yeah.
making a major change at work because people probably aren't going to respond well. And they may not even be aware that it's this sort of underlying constant hum of anxiety that's happening again. Because you're exactly right. Our psychological safety is being threatened and our system knows it. And so it's going to release stress hormones. And then that makes us feel more anxious. And we get into this just total cycle.
Do you
Um,
think that this political season is really, I mean, I know there's some differences, maybe in like the effect that it has on us, but I feel like, because I was just doing a workshop where it was all about how, baby boomers had to deal with this and Gen X had to deal with this, Gen Z. I mean, and they've all had a ton of stuff.
yes.
Yes, the youngest generation now had to deal with COVID and the shutdowns, and that was a huge impact on their psyche.
Yeah.
However, I mean, you look at baby boomers and you were dealing with like the Cuban Missile Crisis, you're dealing with the Berlin Wall, like tons of stuff that was hugely political that had a massive impact on people's well-being. So are we really that different right now to all of those, or is it just that much more in our face because of social media, because of the media kind of losing its way and being a lot more partisan than it should be? Do you think it's that different?
I've really thought about this a lot too, because I agree with you. If you look at the big picture, it's like horrible things happen. But if you're looking at hundreds of years, many, many horrifically worse things have happened. I think that what's really causing a ton of the um, added pressure that everyone feels, it's two things. One is we've been divided before. I mean, we're a two-party system, so it's always Republicans versus Democrats. But there used to be a blend. There were moderates,
Yeah.
liberals, conservatives in each party. And it feels now that we've been forced into this, like everything else. It's either black or white. It's a binary choice. And so many people are not comfortable with that. Like they don't want to say they believe everything about one candidate or the other. They believe,
Yeah.
and we've moved away from policies, right, into personalities, which is a weird thing. But I think the biggest thing that has eroded our ability to sort of trust them, but also trust the information is the massive amount of misinformation that's out there. So
That's
there's
that's a
this feeling
great
of
point. That's a
there's no
great point. Yeah.
anchor. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if somebody says something and you go to confirm, is that true? Is that real? Now we don't even really have a source that we know 100% sure that it's real because we have sort of eliminated the meaning of facts. So and that to me is a support or a steadiness. Like, okay, but I can always see what the truth is, no matter because politicians are going to say whatever they have to say to get elected, frankly.
Right.
But usually they know that then you're going to check and make sure what they're saying is true. So they may mess up or they may say some fibs but this is like just outright there's no basis for truth. And I think that that's probably greatly affecting everything because now you're into a lot of the arguments aren't about a policy or anything like that. It's that something is a lie, something is a lie, something is a lie. And then the opposite side is saying, no, this is the truth, or that's a lie. It's like, what's happened to our structure, our infrastructure, and the things that we could depend on? And then I think the other piece of it was we've always trusted that there will always be a peaceful transfer of power. We've always trusted that we had a nonpartisan, and not fully nonpartisan, but basically nonpartisan. They rose above the politics at the level of the Supreme Court most of the time. And I think now everything's become politicized. So we also don't believe we can trust in those institutions to protect the population if something goes awry. And so I do think this is different in that. Because,
I do too. I think that the stability factor, like,
yeah,
this may sound completely idiotic, but when I was younger and first able to vote and stuff like that, you would see these countries where they would have a coup or they would overthrow a leader and they're, you know, bombing and doing all of this stuff, throwing tear gas. And you're like, oh, so glad I live in the United States. And that would never happen here. And it kind of made you look at these other countries like, wow, they're so unstable,
Right.
and I'm so glad that I'm not in a country like that. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with conflict. I think conflict is great for a country. The type we're having right now is not great. So yeah, it's just interesting because I would see these other countries and think, they're so unstable. I'm so glad that I live where I live, and we don't have to deal with that because we've got our what together.
Yeah.
And then after that happened, it was like, oh gosh, we really don't. And we're vulnerable to that too. And I think it just kind of really rocked me to my core a little bit, to where it was like, oh, I'm not as safe as I thought I was.
I think that is what's making this feel so much more anxiety invoking. And I can honestly say in the past, I did not, and I don't mean it's not important who's president. Of course it's important, but to me it was not as much the president even as, Congress and the Senate, because they're the ones who are really, if they don't,
100%.
right. And so it'd be like, okay, you might have a Democrat in the White House, but a Republican majority in the House, which means we're only going to see policies that are really on the sort of the more conservative side.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, for 4 years, and then we do it
Yeah.
again. Doesn't mean I agreed either way with either party. It was that, okay, now I know kind of what to expect. Likewise, that you could have a Republican in the White House, but a Democratic majority. So then you kind of know, oh, okay, now, like one term, it might be, oh, our taxes are probably going to go up. And the next term, oh, maybe our taxes will go down. But it was not life altering or making me feel like I have no protection from my government depending on who's in office.
Right.
And so the ridiculous nuttiness of our House and Senate over the past like 12 years, that had already started eroding
Clowns. Sorry.
Yeah, started eroding my confidence. And that's what I'm saying. It's been like probably the last 12 years, maybe longer. I don't know. I didn't look at a calendar, but it just seems like every year it's getting more unstable. And so now this seems to be the culmination of, let's just see, is anything in place anymore, or is it just going to all blow up? And part of that is, again, the fear mongering, because you're hearing such ridiculous things or terrible things. And at the same time, it's not just happening in the campaign. It's all of this misinformation and all of this, half the population, whichever half, doesn't feel like they're being represented anymore. And the changing districts. And it just seems like it's not necessarily a fair and standard and stable process anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I do have to say, like, I've never really thought that the way that our government runs is great. I don't believe in a two-party system. I definitely think that we need to have much more than that to have everybody well represented. And I do think a lot needs to change in government.
Yeah, me too.
I just am not sure that this is the way. That there has to be a better way.
Well, again, for now, we can't control any of this other than to vote. We can vote. Everybody can vote. That's always a good thing to do. But again, I think we need to go sort of internal here and see what we can do to get through this period. So in addition to paying attention to your media consumption and paying attention to what's in your control versus out of your control, back to the emotional triggers, we touched on that a minute ago. You can start paying attention to, are there specific election related activities or content
Topics
that trigger stronger or more uncomfortable emotions? I've gotten to the point there are certain people I don't want to hear their voice. Like that's one of my triggers. So it's just like I mute the TV if it's on. For every political ad, both parties or all parties, I don't even know who some of them are, I mute it. I don't want to hear any lies or accusations or blaming. It's like, we have problems here we need to fix. This is like, it's irritating to me. So what you can do in that case, whatever your trigger is, then just, pause, take a breath, observe what's happening that's triggering you. And if you can change it, like a device or a TV or something, do it. But then in addition to that, if it's something live or in person, you want to pause and observe for a moment and breathe, because you still want to respond versus react. That gives you that couple of seconds to just think like, is this really worth me getting into an argument with somebody over, or causing myself a bigger problem, or, whatever it is. So that would be another easy mindfulness step you can take. You got to practice self-care, because what happens again, when you are uncertain and anxious and fearful, it's hard on your body, it's hard on your brain. So simple things that don't have to take a lot of time, deep breathing. The body scan is great for that. Just scanning your entire body, notice where you're holding tension and release it. If you are sitting at work and maybe there's a conversation going on that's aggravating you between two other people, it's triggering you, maybe a response would be to get up and go take a short mindful walk.
Yeah.
Step outside, something like that, instead of getting sucked in.
Yeah. I do have to get up. Like, I did remove my news widget from my computer so that I can no longer see the headlines on the left-hand side of my screen, because it was getting out of control. It was like I would see something and I'd be like, what? And then I'd click on it and then I'd read it and then I would get all worked up. And it's like, I'm in the middle of doing a workshop on mindfulness. Like, what am I doing? So then I'd have to get up and walk outside and just take a deep breath and remove myself from it, because it really does suck you in. Yeah. And I think that grounding yourself in the moment is a huge helpful technique, because yes, I'm not denying that there could be things that could happen to certain marginalized groups, or the other way around, even if the election goes one way or the other. And so I can understand that there's fear. I do understand it. And I am not discounting anyone's fear. But right now, in this very moment, are you safe?
Exactly.
Right. And if we can kind of bring ourselves into that, and if you aren't, then, try to find help. But at this moment in time, is anyone politically coming after you? You know what I mean? And so I think if we can kind of just put that in perspective, even if it's just for 5 minutes, just get our brain back on track and our emotions more regulated, so we're not in that fear state, because fear is terrible for your body.
Yeah. Well, and but you're making a good point, which is we can't stop the emotion from coming up. Every emotion is valid. It's your system's method of trying to protect you. So there's nothing bizarre or odd or weird or anything about having the emotion, being fearful. I realize one of my fears is that things have just started feeling like they're getting better in other areas of life, like the economy's finally starting to get better. I was shocked when I started to make my grocery list this morning and noticed several prices have come way down on things. It's like, are we getting back to normal? And then the fear is, oh, it's about to get all blown up again. I can't go through it again. That's a what if. I do think it's important, again, to be informed, to be engaged, if you feel like being engaged in the process. But I think maybe the mindful way to do that is don't jump into the big fray. Like maybe you could focus on one cause or one action and you stay in that lane. Not get into the arguments on the street or whatever. Just like, okay, what's a cause? Whichever party, again, it doesn't matter, but maybe that's the way to help get yourself into a position of feeling like you're contributing to the process in a mindful way instead of just blathering negativity out there.
I do want to say too, real quick, that I think it's a wonderful thing to be passionate about something. It's beautiful to have passion, as long as you're not suffocating someone else's passion, right? So if you can explore your own passions for something and how, deeply held those beliefs are, that is wonderful. But don't quash someone else's at the same time.
Yeah. No, really good point. Another thing that just popped into my head is polls.
I did this yesterday. I should not have looked at the polls.
Stop looking at the polls. First of all, historically, they are terrible. I mean, this is just another way for the media to try to grab our attention.
Crystal ball that nobody really knows. I was so mad at myself. I'm like, exit.
Well, here's one of the things I found really interesting, and I won't get into the details because it kind of it reflects on one party over the other, but they were going back and following up with people who had participated in a poll. And it was a live poll. They were like people knocking on doors and then whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And so it turns out, unbeknownst to the pollsters, that a lot of people said they were either registered to vote or that they had already voted by mail just to get the person to go away. So, so just think at that simple level, like
sales call.
Yeah, right. And so most polls are done over the phone or electronically. Well, nobody knows. So the polls are really just it's a device to get you sucked in again to whatever the media platform is, whether it's on your phone or on TV or whatever it is. So don't put a lot of stock in polls, and they've been notoriously wrong in the past. So that's just another trigger point that you have control over. don't get sucked into that. I guess the final strategy I would say that I can think of is gratitude. And you may say, oh my gosh, I'm not grateful for this. I don't mean that. But focus on aspects of your life that are stable, that are joyful, that no matter what's going on, so if you have your family or your significant other, or maybe you love your job, or, whatever's in that stable, safe, calm zone. And then practice being positive, not about the chaos, but about those things that you're blessed with, so that you're reinforcing to your brain that you're safe, that everything's okay, so that you're going to get the feel good hormones instead of the stress hormones.
Mm.
Now, I have one thing and I really debated about this, but I thought I need to try this, because even I'm getting triggered now. But when we try to practice mindfulness during a very challenging period, it's actually the best learning opportunity. Because if
Mm.
you can put into place these mindfulness practices when things are so wackadoodle, it's going to be a powerful lesson. I'm going to try this. I don't know if I can do it. I mean, I'm just being honest, but it's worth trying. And it's based in the Buddhist concept of non-attachment, but it's
Mm.
about letting go of the outcome, right? Quit focusing on the outcome. I love that face. Well, here's the reason.
I'll try.
The outcome's going to be whatever it's going to be.
It is. Can't control it.
So so it's not about changing the outcome. It is what it is when the time comes. So the stress we're causing for ourselves is hanging on to, it has to be my outcome,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, no, it doesn't. It could be the other side's outcome. So
Yeah.
if you can achieve that, then what you really do achieve is inner peace. And I'm really good at non-attachment with, it was hard for me at the beginning, but with my own goals, or with what's going to happen with a business decision, or like I just focus on the process. So it's, the journey instead of the destination. And my stress level plummeted. With this feels harder to let go of the outcome, but that's really illogical because we can't
Yeah.
change the outcome. We can vote again, but we can't change what's going to happen. So anyway, that's a big challenge for anyone who wants to try that. Another, and again, it's hard right now, which is why I'm going to work harder at this, but empathy, and active listening, both strengthen our mindfulness skills. But see if you can just try, make the attempt to listen with compassion, even if it's an opposing view.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do this a little bit because I really do believe, regardless of which side you're on, this is all about unmet needs. So people's needs are not being met. This is
Yes.
how it's coming out in society. So if I can focus on, well, I can see why, this is challenging for them, or something like that, where you're trying to tap into your empathy, it does reduce your own stress, but it's also going to help over the long haul to reduce political polarization. And it fosters more of a sense of community, because I think we've lost that too, which is part of the problem here.
Yeah. I was
Um,
reading something too that was saying, as long as you feel safe to do so, it's okay to talk about it. And
yeah,
talking about it, even if it's with somebody with an opposing view, chances are you will find some common ground. And that common ground does create that sense of community. And they were saying that that's really kind of what they think is missing right now. It's like, because we are so scared to talk about it, that sense of community isn't there.
yeah.
And that's why people are feeling isolated and alone, and this psychological unsafety. And,
We're at a strange point in history for sure. There's one last one that I thought, I know I can do this one because it's just an internal exploration, but this is an opportunity to explore our own biases. All human beings have bias, so don't feel like there's anything wrong with that. We have it. It's built into us. But we can change them. And so when you notice you're automatically judging someone because of their political party or because of one of their beliefs, just kind of check in. Well, am I biased? Where did that come from? So you're just doing an internal exploration to see if you can minimize your own biases. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them or condone what they're doing or whatever it is. It's another opportunity for growth. I guess I'll just say, especially because you brought it into this, Melissa, is, many countries around the world, including this one, have gone through major, even just like forget all the other major disasters and periods of time in history, but major political upheavals in the past.
mm-hmm.
And, you can look at that and say, oh, we're not learning, or you can come up with something negative out of that. But what I would encourage people to do is recognize how resilient people are.
Yeah.
We're all still here. It keeps happening, but we're all still here. Hopefully we're still voting. And maybe the overarching, and which I've turned to in this week, because I can feel it so much more this week, is this is going to pass. It's not going to be forever. How long it will be is, uncomfortable, is going to depend on your political views, but it's going to pass. So I would really encourage our listeners to just try to remember, try to tap into your own inner power and your own calm amid the external political noise. Like, is your life really any different today than it was yesterday or last week? And of course, it's hard to say that now because of the pandemic and everything we've been through. But in general, there's how much is your individual life going to change based on what happens?
Yeah.
The true answer is probably not much, but the truer answer is we don't know.
Yeah.
So focus on now, focus on your strengths, your resilience, tap into that inner calm, and, just kind of try to get through this without sort of losing your integrity or saying something you're going to, regret forever later, or, just reacting in any way that's going to not benefit you.
Yeah. And instead of spending the next couple of weeks in a constant state of worry, think about if all of this stuff that you're worrying about never comes to fruition, and now you have worked yourself into probably a high state of stress.
Yeah.
And that would be stomach issues, sleep issues, it could be heart issues, any of these things. And if none of it comes to fruition that you've been worrying about, then you wasted all of that time for nothing.
And if it all comes to pass, you still wasted all that time getting stressed weeks before you had to.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not going to say that I'm immune to the stress. I am stressed out about it. So I get it. I'm with you. And I'm going to try my best to not be that way for the next couple of weeks, or do my best to use my tools to help myself.
All right. Well, I hope we have a peaceful, relatively calm next couple of weeks. I hope you vote. I think it's so important that we all vote. It's a right that was hard fought and won for us, and I think it needs to be respected. And I hope that regardless of the outcome, that we can practice mindfulness to not only reduce our own stress, but to help calm our families, our communities, maybe our churches, our synagogues, whatever it is, that if we all stay calm and just recognize that we're in the present, we're okay, and we'll work through whatever happens, I think we'll come out of all of this better versus what could happen.
Agreed. 100%.
All right. Well, I guess I want to say good luck to everyone. I hope you, I will say that, check out the guided meditations. We have some that could help through this, and we hope to see you back here next week. This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to other great shows. Visit our website, amindfulmoment.com, to access podcasts, scripts, and reading recommendations. A Mindful Moment is hosted by Teresa McKee and Melissa Sims. This podcast is produced by Work to Live Productions. Thank you for tuning in.